Hi, and welcome back to Benedictus Dominus. My name is Nolan Martin, and today I'm going to be talking about the Catholicity of Shakespeare's play Hamlet. All right, so Shakespeare, I believe we all basically know him, that he is a poet, he is a writer, he is a thinker, and he writes play. He's an English playwright, and one of his plays is the play of Hamlet. Now, Hamlet, I believe, brings the audience into questioning the great questions of the time, right? Do we follow the Church of England? Do we follow the Pope? Right? So are we a papist? Or are we going to follow the Church of England? Or are we going to follow the king? Who is correct in their teaching? What teachings make the most sense to us? Right? These questions are all kind of discussed within the inner workings of Hamlet. I especially think that if Shakespeare was a secret Catholic, then he's definitely going to include religion into his plays in some way, shape, or form to try to persuade people to go one way or the other, or persuade people, or just insert little tiny truths about Catholicism into his plays. All right, so if we wanted to go directly into Act 1, I think we can start seeing that Horatio and the other guards they're the posts at the watch, right? Horatio speaks to the guards, right, about what they have seen during their watch. Okay, so while these guards are on watch, in their midst a ghost appears, right? So the guards, they're scared, and they see this ghost as a really frightening figure, but nevertheless, they're like, "Whoa, that looks like the late king." Horatio is there with these guards, and he's saying he attempts to speak to this ghost, and he says, "What art thou usurpest this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form, in which the majesty of buried Denmark, right? Did something march? By heaven, I charge thee, speak." Right, so Horatio, he recognizes the ghost as the king. He's like, "Why are you appearing in this form? Why do you look like the late king? Like, you need to speak up. Like, you need to tell us who you are and what you're doing here, because you're not supposed to be here," right? So then the ghost appearing to the guards, like, he's the first instance in which Shakespeare kind of gets his audience to start like thinking deeply, like, what's going on here? What is this all about? Why is the late king? Why is he returning in ghost form? What's the importance here? All right. So, kind of getting deeper into it, like, is this ghost, a demon? Is it a lost soul? What is this ghost? Is it good? Is it a bad ghost? So Horatio and Bernardo is another guard, right? They now both believe that this is the late king, right? They start saying, this is the lost soul of the late king, right? So, is Shakespeare saying something here? What is he trying to get across? Well, I think that Shakespeare may have been considering the concept of Protestants who fear ghosts because they believe that good Christians go straight to heaven, and that if one was not in heaven, they must be a soul from hell, right? So is Shakespeare here, by implementing a ghost into his play, showing that either this is a demon or it's it must be a demon, because there is no such thing as a soul or a ghost that is not in heaven, right? If this ghost is like struggling, how can we get it to heaven, right? Catholics would be purgatory and then heaven, right? But Protestants, there's really no such thing as ghosts, because if you're a good Christian, then you go to heaven, straight to heaven. If you are a bad Christian, then you go to hell, right? So this ghost must be from hell, or as Shakespeare is implementing, that there is something else here, right? Is this the truth between Catholicism or Protestantism, right? He is starting to implement into the play these thoughts that he wants people to think about, right? So Catholic teaching, as I said, it leaves room for a soul that is yet to find heaven, but not in hell, right? They're in purgatory, right? And they need assistance to get into heaven. They need prayers. They need help. All right. So moving on to Act 2, right? Shakespeare, he reveals that the position of the new king Claudius, who's the brother of Hamlet, that he's now the king, right? So the king King Claudius, right? He's speaking to Hamlet, trying to get him to stop grieving over his own father's death. I mean, imagine if my father died, I would be grieving for a long time as well. But King Claudius wants nothing of it. He wants him to just get over it, all right? All right, so what does King Claudius want here? All right, he wants Hamlet to now look to him as a father, to follow his plan of education for him at the school of Wittenberg, all right? So the new king, he wants King Hamlet to look to him as a father, to follow him as a role model, and look for him for guidance and education. And King Claudius really wants him to go to school at Wittenberg, all right? So if we want the imagery to kind of work here, all right? So the king is really the representation of Protestantism as a whole, or the Church of England, right? He wants his kin and his followers to now look to him, and not to the late king. He wants everybody to look to him for guidance and him for truth. Don't look towards the late king. All right, he's dead. We don't want you to follow him, is what King Claudius is trying to get through. All right. Why does he want Hamlet to go to the school of Wittenberg? Well, at the time, Wittenberg is the most prominent Protestant school at the time. All right. If you actually look it up, Wittenberg is the most prominent Protestant school at the time. All right. So what else is going on here in scene 2? All right. We have Shakespeare kind of throwing an interesting role of Hamlet's mother into the scene, right? And she's begging Hamlet not to go to Wittenberg. Why would the queen not want Hamlet to go to that school? All right. She wants Hamlet to stay with her, right? Well, I mean, why do we need Hamlet to stay with the queen? All right. Well, the queen, she knows something is up with the king, right? She knows that he's kind of fishy, and something has gone awry here, right? We need Hamlet to stay here and kind of protect the queen. We need Hamlet to stay here and not go off and learn these false truths, right? We need Hamlet to be loving and to stay here to protect the queen, and ideally protect the true Catholicity, the true Catholicism of England, right? All right, continuing on in the same scene, all right, we kind of see like kind of a play on words when Hamlet and Horatio see each other. All right, so like Hamlet is surprised to see Horatio, and because he's like Horatio is studying at Wittenberg, so Hamlet, he comes to ask Horatio. He goes, But what in faith make you from Wittenberg? All right. So in reply, Horatio says, "A truant disposition, good my lord." All right. So what does this mean? Well, Hamlet gives a wonderful reply about how Horatio is not a truant, and that he does not want to hear about the enemy. Right. So, what is a truant? So, a truant in a traditional sense is someone who leaves or goes away from school without reason. Right. So, like, Horatio, why are you back here? Right? Why did you just go away from the school for no reason at all? All right. So, for instance, in today, a truant would be someone who's just skipping school or leaving school without reason. Right. So, let's say at the beginning of the day, a student comes in and they're kind of marked down, but then they go to the next class period, like the next class bell rings. That student's nowhere to be found. Right? They're not in class. You can't find them in the school building. All right. Or you just can't find them in class. That student is now truant. All right. So that is what Hamlet is now asking of Horatio. He's like, all right. So Hamlet starts asking. So when Hamlet is asking, "What in faith make you from Wittenberg?" All right. I believe Shakespeare could be using the word truant to explain the position of the enemy, which is the Protestant school of Wittenberg. So it's really kind of left to us to kind of decipher whether Horatio is a student who leaves without good reason, or whether he is a Catholic who leaves Wittenberg, who does not have a good reason for leaving the faith, right? So is Horatio just a student here, or is he a Catholic who is at the school Wittenberg, and he decides, or he's a good Catholic and he doesn't go to school Wittenberg because he is a good Catholic, right? He doesn't have a good reason for leaving this faith. He doesn't have a good reason to start following King Claudius and his education plan, right? He doesn't want to leave the Catholic faith and start following the Church of England, right? Because he doesn't have a good reason to leave Catholicism. He doesn't have a reason to leave the Pope. All right, so continuing on to Act 1, Scene 5, all right, it kind of brings the audience, or us as the reader, right, into a farther plot as Hamlet and the ghost walk together. All right, so at this time, the ghost is revealing that he is the spirit of the late king. All right, so now we know that the own ghost is saying that he is the spirit of the late king. All right, so not only does he look like the Pope, or look like the king, but we know that he in fact now is the king, as he is admitting it so. All right, the king also admits that he is in a place where his past crimes are being burned away. All right, they're being burned away. So Shakespeare definitely here is mentioning that he's not in hell, right? This spirit is not in hell. This spirit is somewhere else where his past crimes are being burned away, right? So what this means, it gives the imagery that he is in purgatory, all right? So we know that, well, I'll get to purgatory here in a second. Let me go ahead and continue on with finishing up that scene, all right? So the king, he also reveals that King Claudius is the one who killed him while he was sleeping, all right? Farther, the spirit conveys to Hamlet that the new king should not be anymore, all right? So King Claudius is revealing, or King Hamlet is revealing that he was killed by his brother in his sleep, and that King Claudius, he just should be no more. We need to get rid of him. All right. How do we get rid of this person who is controlling the new empire and is misleading everybody? All right. All right. So back to purgatory. All right. We now know that King King Hamlet is now in purgatory. All right. He is now burning because of his past, as his soul is being purified because he died unhassled, disappointed, unannailed, right? That comes from the play as well. If you have this edition, and come from Shakespeare, William, and A.R. Braunmüller's translation on page 33. All right, so if we look at the kind of the footnotes of that text, they start speaking about that unhassled means he died without the Eucharist. All right, so disappointed means he died unprepared spiritually. All right, he died unannailed, which means he died without the sacrament of extreme unction or last rites. All right, King Hamlet, he was a man of conviction. He died so suddenly that he did not even have a chance to reform himself or defend his life physically or spiritually, right? Because he died in his sleep, right? He was killed in his sleep. All right, so he didn't have a chance to go to mass to repent, to make sure that when he was dying that he was in the complete state of grace, right? He had these venial sins. He had these venial sins on his soul, right? He wasn't have a chance to die with the last rites, to die with the sacrament, to die with extreme unction, right? So what does this mean? Well, it means that the ghost, King Hamlet, is asking Hamlet to rid his uncle of the throne and save his mother, and to save his mother from King Claudius. All right. He's asking for his son to get revenge for his death. All right. So King Hamlet is kind of representing the Catholic Church prior to the Church of England, because he died so quickly unannounced. Right. There was so little notice, right? So now we start noticing that murder is wrong here, right? King Claudius, you can't just kill King Hamlet in his sleep. That is messed up, dude. All right. So Shakespeare, is he now showing how angry the Catholic people are at how angry the Catholic people are at the Church of England, right? For just killing off the Catholic Church and implementing your own system, right? Just overnight, just killing the Catholic Church and becoming king, becoming the head of the church by yourself, right? all right, we want the church, we want the Catholic Church to come back. That's what the Catholic people are going to be doing, right? If you're now forced to hide, right? I think Shakespeare kind of brings a couple other ideas or imagery into it as well, right? He kind of brings the idea of like free will along with imagery of the Bible in Act 1, Scene 2. All right, he starts with Hamlet on line 129. All right, so Hamlet is speaking about how God could let this happen and how the world has gone to shame. Hamlet says, "'Tis an unweeded garden. 'Tis an unweeded garden." All right, Hamlet is trying to understand how God can let his place become such an overgrown and infested with evil. Shakespeare is referring back to the Garden of Eden and to the fall of man due to temptations. Shakespeare is also letting the audience know here, or the reader, right, know that they have free will, right? But they must still use it in accordance to the canon of God. All right, so we have free will, but we still must abide by God's laws, right? So these laws are what set us free. Is what he's getting down to, right? We shouldn't be like the Garden of Eden. We should just pay attention that we have these choices, and these choices can lead us down the right path, or they can lead us down the wrong path, right? Choices have consequences. All right, so Shakespeare will continue to incorporate this concepts of good and evil along with free will throughout the play. Hamlet especially struggles with this because he feels emotion, but knows that he must follow the authority and the laws of God, right? He feels angry that his uncle, King Claudius, killed his father, King Hamlet, in his sleep, right? So this is a very emotional play. All right, we start seeing in Act 3, Scene 1, that Hamlet gives like his famous soliloquy, right? To be or not to be, that is strings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? Hamlet is pouring out his inner struggles and how much suffering he has had, right? He's having an inner debate within it, if it is better to live with these sufferings, right? With these evils in the world, or is it better to live with these sufferings in the world and follow God, or is it better to get rid of them by committing suicide? Right? This play gets dark, right? Hamlet knows that if it's against the church's teaching, right, to commit suicide, and that in doing so it will get him nowhere good, right? It will get him to hell, right? If just by committing suicide, you will not have this eternal life, right? It is better to live with these sufferings and to follow church's teaching rather than to just commit suicide, right? It is better to keep going and carry the burden as one needs to fear the afterlife that goes into the unknown, right? You don't know what's going to happen, so Hamlet kind of said he has to make a decision, right? Am I going to live with these sufferings and follow God? Or am I going to go into the unknown and possibly make the unfortunate mistake of committing suicide? All right, I promise we're getting closer here. I know this is a long video, but I think it's very fruitful to keep going here. Right, so we start seeing another instance of Shakespeare kind of bringing forth this battle between good and evil in Act 3, Scene 3. Right, King Claudius begins to pray about the state of his soul. All right, so we start seeing the Church of England start praying about their own soul. Right, you start seeing this guilt that comes forth that Shakespeare is portraying through King Claudius. But Shakespeare also shows that King Claudius is feeling good about this, right? Because it comes with benefits, it comes with power, it comes with sweetness, right? It comes with people following you, right? So Claudius, he wants to think that there is enough, right? That there's sweet rain from heaven to wash it white as snow, right? That his blood stains, right, are going to be washed away. There's going to be a sweet rain from heaven that is going to wash it as white as snow, and it'll be all good, right? What is King Claudius wanting here, right? He wants to be pardoned, but he knows he cannot retain all the things that make him feel good to be pardoned, right? He knows that he has to make the choice whether he's going to continue living with this blood stain and keep this power, or is he going to get rid of this power and be pardoned? Is he going to be washed? Is he going to be white as snow? Is he going to be pure, right? during this whole entire period, like Hamlet is watching the king in his prayerful state. Right? Hamlet doesn't know what's going on in the king's mind, but Hamlet right at this point, while the king is praying in his chambers, right? Hamlet wants to kill him so badly, but he does not decide to kill him because he sees that the king is now kind of in a prayerful state, right? And that he will not go to heaven if he dares to murder him, right? So that's what keeps Hamlet from killing King Claudius, right? He knows that this revenge was not fruitful at all to take a life, right? So he does not want King Claudius to kind of be in a prayerful state when he dies as well, right? He wants King Claudius to go to hell, right? All right. Hamlet eventually has to come up with his decision, right? That if he kills the king, he himself will not be in the state of grace, and also that killing the king, you cannot bring good out of evil, right? So Hamlet realizes that no good can come from evil, right? The ends don't justify the means, right? He finds himself in an evil world that is tempting him every second, right? The sling and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? So I have the ability to do things, but if I go crazy, if I fall into these temptations, right, these arrows can lead to misfortune, right? They cannot bring good out of this evil. All right, continue on. Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 4. Right, he starts finding himself completely in one of his askings of, asking his father. He's like, all right, Hamlet was told not to endanger his mother or to get revenge on her for marrying Claudius. Right. However, he still is to tell her of the misfortune of his late father being killed by Claudius. Right. Hamlet is going to tell the queen that Claudius killed his father. Right. So rather than killing her with daggers as Claudius did, he decides to tell her the news, and she says, "These words like daggers in my ears." Right. Hamlet corrects the queen, right, which is his mother, and he shows her for what Claudius and herself really are. Right. He really shows the truth. All right. So now, the queen, she now has to contemplate her soul. Right. Hamlet has already reevaluated himself and his morals. Now he's trying to get his mother to reevaluate her morals and try to get his mother to heaven, as the Ghost King has asked. Right. All right. Does the queen continue following King Claudius, who is the Church of England, or does she now start following? Does she come to the truth again? Right. She has to now contemplate her morals and that truth. She has to come to that decision on her own, right? But Hamlet can help guide her, as the late king is trying to do, right? Because his job is to get the queen to heaven, all right? Because he married her. All right, so ironically, we get to Act 4, Scene 7, when King Claudius says, "Revenge should have no bounds." All right, so Hamlet no longer is seeking revenge of his father in such a way to kill him himself, right? Rather, because he's seeking the moral high ground here. Right, and Claudius, on the other hand, he plans to have Laertes poison his saber, right, for the duel and draw blood to kill Hamlet. Right, Laertes and Hamlet are going to duel. Claudius has devised a plan that Hamlet was to drink from a poisoned cup as well, thus having two chances at killing Hamlet. Right, Laertes, however, he does strike at Hamlet with the poisoned sword. However, Hamlet does not drink after. Right, so there's a break. Hamlet doesn't drink after the round, and it ends up happening where Hamlet's own mother ends up drinking from this cup and being poisoned. Right. Then all of a sudden they get into the round. They start the next round. Laertes and Hamlet get into a scuffle, and Hamlet gets the poisoned sword because there is the sabers. Right. They get dropped. They each pick up a different one. Right, and Hamlet ends up striking Laertes with the saber that's poisoned. Right, Laertes, right, he gives up the king and his plot. He basically says, "All right, this is what's going on here," as he's dying, and the king is injured by injured by Hamlet, and he dies, right? Because, okay, now the king has an act of aggression against Hamlet and his mother, right? So now Hamlet has the right justification to injure the king, right? As Lear is dying, he asks forgiveness of Hamlet, and he eventually ends up dying. All right, Hamlet soon died. Hamlet also was wounded in this. All right. So not only was Hamlet injured by the poisoned sword, but I think Claudius was also injured by the poisoned sword. So in the end, everyone ends up dying. Right? What's the moral of the story that Shakespeare ends up presenting here? Right? Right. The ends do not justify the means. Right? One can do evil and feel good for doing so. However, the acts are still wrong, no matter the consequences. Right? Hamlet does not do evil in order to achieve the goodness of his father's murder being dead. Rather, he waits for God to take him, right? He follows the goodness even though he struggles with the concept. He struggles with suicide and death throughout the play, but then he concurs his fears of death and knows that it could be his time to go in the duel. He's a man of God who follows his laws, whereas his uncle, King Claudius, right? He thinks he can be God by giving or by doing as he pleases and controlling who lives and who dies, right? King Claudius thinks he has control. He tries to play God. He tries to be the Pope. He tries to be the church, right? All right, so Claudius, he plotted and thought he had developed the best plan he could. But in the end, it was not enough, right? He ends up dying. He lost his wife because he was cruel and wanted to kill Hamlet, right? Because she drinks from the poisonous cup. He then lost his own life because of his sins, an attack on the queen, right? While he achieved killing Hamlet, he did not succeed, right? He just ends up dying. All right, so overall, Shakespeare blatantly shows the audience that these actions have consequences, right? People should think before they act and follow the laws of God because he is willing to bring swift justice upon them. One cannot go through life trying to be powerful and controlling because humans are nothing in comparison to God, right? No matter what you do, one cannot predict or control the future. Human souls will either go either to heaven by following God's laws, or they will go to hell if they fall into the earthly pleasures of life, right? What is better, to live life here on earth as lavishly as possible, or to dread the earth but in a wonderful life of heaven?